for the sake of. Can you hear me well? Buenas noches, we would say. Good evening, everyone. Almost good evening or good evening already. Welcome to all who join in person and via live stream. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Special greetings to my students at Dominican University who are connected via live stream today. And also welcome to the students who are present today. How many of you present are students at DePaul University? Yes, let's give it up for the students. Special thanks to the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology at DePaul University, particularly Bill Cavanaugh, Karen Kraft, and Marlon Aguilar for your invitation and all your amazing work in bringing us all together today. I also would like to thank Carolina Perez, my dear amiga, colega en la lucha, and the Tepeyac Catholic Campus Ministry at DePaul University. I also have part of my spouse today here, so I want to thank you for being with me today and my colleagues at Dominican University who are present today, so thank you. And I am going to do something different today as I go through this kind of discussion / lecture. When I was growing up in Colombia, in Bogotá, Colombia, with my abuelitas, I remember that one of my tías, mi tía Luce, she always, when we went to visit someone or when we went to visit some of the elders, she asked us all, cousins, primos, right, to cut like in unison, like in a choir, gracias, or muchas gracias, or thank you, like that. We always have to make sure to repeat it, right? So I grew up in that culture of people repeating phrases or mantras or little canticos or songs. So we're gonna do something. I am going to ask you at some point, and the people of God said, and then I am going. Everybody's going to repeat presente. Sounds good? It sounds good. Great. That presente also, I'm not going to appropriate it. When I joined for the first time the Academy of Catholic Hispanic Theologians of the United States, a way to remember those who came before us, those theologians, those who paid for us, a way to remember them, we always remember them by saying presente. So that's why we are remembering today those who are not here with us. And this is a week of remembrance. And the people of God said, excellent. So I would like to take this opportunity today to remember one of our elders in our theological familia who departed from this life last week. The father of liberation theology, Padre Gustavo Gutierrez. And he reminds us that that in his groundbreaking work and his text, A Theology of Liberation, and I open quotation, theology, neighbor, is not he whom I find in my path, but rather he, and I will use inclusive language, he, she, they, in whose path I place myself. He, she, they, whom I approach and actively seek. Close quotation. As someone who grew up and attended college in the global south, in Latin America, the struggle, peace, justice, and ultimately liberation of our communities was not an option, was an inherent component of our community's everyday life. The lived realities of God's people, lo cotidiano de la gente, el sueño de la gente, de tener una vida más justa y en paz, the dreaming and gazing for a more humane and just world. I learned about his work as a college student in political sciences and international relations in Latin America. I always tell my students I was not born a theologian, I became one. And into the work of Hispanic Latina women's liberation theology, later as a doctoral student in theology in Miami, Florida. Now that I look back, grassroots are important. I have come to the realization that my work as a Latina scholar, teacher, and woman in relationship with my own community is greatly influenced and rooted in the work of liberation theology. Last week, the day after Gutierrez's passing, I was thinking that my students' work in the classroom is a continuation and reimagination of this beatific work, God's holy work, interpreted through their lenses, through their lived experience, through all that is good and the beauty in who they are, where they come from. That's what we need to remember. The beauty of who we are and where we come from. Remember. Gracias, Padre Gutierrez, for your work. And the people of God said, let us hope the work and theological insight that we are sharing today is not just mere intellect or an intellectual exercise, but also may provide esperanza, the kind of hope that motivates new theological insights, imagination, dialogue, liberation, and offers new ways of knowing, doing, and relating to the world. Most importantly, I invite us all to dream together as we imagine God's people, our students in our particular contexts, our communities, our familias, as active participants in making this world a more humane place and just for all. So I'm going to show an image, which is a theological illustration designed by one of our current students in my Abuelita Theology course. And I am going to explain, and all of us are going to have the opportunity to explain and unpack together using all our senses if we are able to do so. And then this was designed by one of my very own current students in my Abuelita Theology course, Miss Monica Pete. I am going to, okay. Ms. Monica Petek is a graphic design major and theology minor at Dominican University, and she's taking a course intensification this semester in Abuelita Theology as part of my research. But course material beyond the classroom, and in spaces like this, as she uses the elements she's learning in her graphic design program at the on this particular occasion, Monica not only interpreted course material, but also collaborated with us today to interpret today's presentation with the following illustration. So as we continue passing on wisdom, sabiduría, and creative new knowledge, I would like to invite interpret Monica's illustration today. Okay? And so when you look at Monica's illustration titled En lo cotidiano, what comes to mind? And I am going to invite the person that is next to you. So you guide the understanding of what you are seeing with the person next to you. What comes to mind? I'm going to give you a minute or so to share with the person next to you. People, navigate with people and tell them what comes to mind. For those of you who are online, if you have a chat or something, feel free to share. Now gather everyone right now. Maybe we're gonna have some time for discussion and questions, but maybe few initial thoughts. Maybe few people, just few initial thoughts. And students, I am students. What you say is beauty. It's true. It's goodness. So please dare to critical thinking, right? You are critically thinking and reflecting. So I'm going to invite and encourage the students to participate. Okay, I feel in the classroom. So few initial. Same time, you see different. La vida. So pretty, maybe everybody else. Nobody has mentioned el cafecito. How important, right? But when I went to my abuela's home at the end of each meal, right? Cafecito, right? Thank you. So I am going to share Monica's words and theologizing of her illustration. So in the work of Monica's theological scholarship through art, she writes, open quotation, I created En lo Cotidiano as a way of visualizing the space where Abuelita Theology was born, specifically in the presence of those closest to us. I utilized a blend of skin colors and the hands to present the possibility for viewers to see themselves in the hands displayed, especially those from underrepresented ethnic racial backgrounds. The inclusion of the multi-tone hands also serves as a reminder that Hispanic and Latinx ethnicities, as well as our experiences, are not a monolith. I included food as well as art on the back wall because many communities connect through creative expressions. En lo cotidiano is a visual beckoning to reflect on and actively participate in your community's traditions and storytelling, because storytelling is how we grow as people. End quote. Thank you, Monica, for your theological insight. and reflection. And by the way, Monica was not able to be present today because she had class, but she's connected live stream. So the work of Monica and all the insights that you all shared, which is a communal social location, speak in a way that does not simplify the multi-layered complexities of social location and lived experience. In this case, the Latinx or Latine Catholic experience in the context of the United States. Also, it opens the space to reflect that this presentation does not intend, or neither this illustration, does not intend to speak for the concreteness and particularities of the church, the larger communities, and the academy, the multifarious intersecting dimensions of Latin theological discourse that is informed and shaped by the diverse and rich social context of the Americas. And when I say the Americas, some of the insights that are shared are a result of my ministry of teaching and scholarship with college-age Latinx students in the classroom and beyond in the context of South Florida and now in the Midwest, most specifically in the city of Chicago. And also part of the En Conjunto scholarship in practical theology, U.S. Latina theology, and Mujerista or Hispanic women. So, Abuelita Theology. Why Abuelita and why theology? As I was reflecting on the thoughtful and intentional idea of beginning the program with the practice of breaking bread together. And when I was sharing about the program, and we was back and forth with Karen, and I was like, what an intentional opportunity to start breaking all bread together around the table. The spaces to remember those who brought the food to our tables and also share stories and our lived realities. Sometimes we see these spaces as colloquial additions to an event, and a lecture or a class, when in the reality, a meal in comunidad, a meal in community, breaking bread together is at the heart of a community, la comunidad, where all should be welcome. This is what I learned back in la casa de mis abuelitas, at my grandmother's home in Bogotá, Colombia, in the global south. The theme of Comida, Cultura y Catolicismo series brings an image to my heart. And the image that this series brings to my heart as a theologian, this is the sharing of a meal at my abuela's home in Bogotá, Colombia. And I have to tell you that las comidas en la casa de mis abuelas eran 3 horas. So meals at my grandmother's house were like 3 hours. Because we begin with the meal, then the cafecito, and then all the chisme that comes with it. All the sharing of the stories, all what happened last week, this week, the following week, and even more. We fixed the world, we changed the world, and we never ended, right? And that is a common sharing this commonality as a community. So whenever I go to my abuela's home in Bogotá, and I can't wait to get there in December, she asked me, the first question that she asked me is, Mija, ¿ya comió? So who is familiar with that? Did you eat already? Need to eat more, right? And she quickly makes sure there is a place for me to sit and fully participate at her table. However, her dining and kitchen table represents the spaces where the most life-giving, challenging, and sometimes complex discourses have been composed in the book of my familia, in the book of our families. The privileged space where I experience a little piece of the fullness of life that we're all called to. And Mujerista theologian Dr. Ada Maria Isasi Diaz emphasizes a little bit on this and correlate a little bit on this, on the anthropological and theological question about the struggle for survival, about the struggle to be human, to attain the basic categories that are part of life, to experience, open quotes, a more humane living, close. In this case, to experience food around the table, to experience table and the meaning of table, to experience participation in community, belonging, which is not the case for so many. So we're not here to romanticize anybody or anything, right? Because this is not the case for so many communities. That Hispanic and Latina women liberation theologians, or mujerista theology, how we call it. Have you heard of that? Mujerista theology, Hispanic women's liberation theology. Born more than 50 decades ago. Raised of deep meaning and purpose in life. Questions such, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to suffer? What does it mean to dream? Attaining the basic categories that are part of life. And I want to say that this is beyond the Latinx audience. This is the beyond the Latinx theology. This is a framework of reflection to experience and reflect on what does it mean to be abuelitas. I learned that as Isasidia notes, open quotes, to be fully, end quote, meant to be an active participant at their tables. So yes, my work in Abuelita Theology is dear to my very own social location as a Colombiana living in the Midwest of Florida and raised by my abuelas in the Global South. As I mentioned in the article in my own article of Mis Abuelas y la Teología, open quote, because when I think about the first people who taught me about God's love, my worth and voice as a woman of faith, la devoción de la Virgen, and my responsibility to act in love and justice in this world, I think of my abuelas. End quote. These women, my abuelas, my grandmothers, are the first theologians that I had access to were my abuelas. The people of God said, listen, acknowledge the work of fellow U.S. Latinox theologians that for more than 50 decades experiences and current social contexts of reality, or lo cotidiano, of our grassroots communities as a source of theology. This is right there, Abuelita Theology. There is nothing more real than the concreteness of reality of our communities, lo cotidiano, as a way to understand God's revealed mystery in the concreteness of human existence and at the core of our relationships. And there is nothing more real and concrete than that our communities, God's people walking in hope and faith in the ordinary, with the beauty and the messiness of it all. In my work in practical theology and Latina mujerista theology, Abuelita Theology emerged, you may be wondering, where did that emerge from? From generative themes discovered in original participatory action research among first and second generation college-age Latinas who self-identify Catholics regardless of their local church participation or ministry involvement. This research process led to listening to insights college-age Latinas had about their social location and lived experiences, which were critical to understanding their faith identity and spirituality. I was not able to understand the faith identity of spirituality of college-age students without first understanding their lived experiences and their social context as college students. And again, this is beyond. What does it mean to be a college student today? This is my research. That's what I'm talking about, college students. This work has shaped and is ongoing work within the classroom setting. And listening to the lived experiences of first generation college age Latinx students in the classroom and beyond who self-identify as Catholics, I have found something very interesting. I have found that history does not necessarily entail attending a local parish, affiliating to a particular pastoral ministry, and fully engaging in the sacramental life of the institutional church. In this case, the daily faith practices, including resilience as a critical element of faith, for example, are past mothers and abuelas, the wise women of the home, but also through their grassroots comunidades, through their grassroots communities. And this everyday faith, Catholicism, Latinx faith, and spirituality. That's why campus ministry is so important. Because when the abuela, again, I'm not here to romanticize, is not present, what is the role of the grassroots communities in that everyday faith and spirituality? Dr. Natalia Imperatori Lee talks about this dynamic in her text, Cuéntame, when referring to, open quote, the centrality of women in Latinx Catholicism, end quote. And she continues, open quote, this too is an important consideration for any ecclesiology in the third millennium, end quote. And for those of you who may be wondering, what is ecclesiology, right? Ecclesiology comes from the study, the reflection about what does it mean to be church? What does it mean to be a community of faith walking in hope and with one another, right? In their work from 1980, going back to 1988, we're bringing all those abuelitas, abuelitos. The book titled Hispanic Women Prophetic Voice in the Church, Dr. Ada Maria Isasi Diaz and Sister Yolanda Tarango also talk about active participation in divine mystery. They note, open, to participate in divine mystery, participar de lo divino, participar del misterio divino de Dios, does not depend on gender, race, class, sexual orientation, etc. Close quotation. And they continue, open quotation. This depends on the capacity and the desire to be in relationship with one another. So if we as humans, if we are to be in divine mystery, and to participate in divine mystery depends on the capacity for us to make relationship, then our faith is relational. Our participation in the divine mystery has everything to do with our relationships. La capacidad y el deseo de relacionarse con los demás. Relationships do not depend outside of the ordinary, but rather at the core of our everyday life. Our relationships is not something that happened in the clouds or, okay, I'm just going to go to class and then I'm going to I'm going to put my relationships on pause and then I'm just going to continue being in relationship with the world in which I live after I finish class. Ongoing dynamic and inherent dynamic of what does it mean to be human. And in her essay on theological method in U.S. Latino theology, and that is part of the text From the Heart of Our People, that literally translates Desde el corazón de la gente, here otra abuelita. Dr. Maria Pilar Aquino writes in her early work, open quotation, we have no other place but lo cotidiano. No other place but lo cotidiano to welcome the living word of God or to respond to it in faith. The faith of the people happens within the dynamics of daily existence. End quote. And the people of God said, almost there. And this is connected directly to the communal dimension of lo cotidiano. That's why the title, the communal dimension of lo cotidiano, the everyday, as a critical element of U.S. Latinx theologies. And this is the second piece I would like to talk about and finish with. Actually, la comunidad, the community, is not an abstract understanding of the everyday, but lived out through our relationships. And recently, I just had an aha moment. I work at Dominican University, which has a Dominican charisma. And one of the pillars of the Dominican charism is community. Well, the four pillars are community, service, study, and society, right? So, Mujerista theology, a critical element of Mujerista theology is la comunidad, community. This is not new word. So I said, oh my God, I'm in a community, their relationships and community are rooted. And this is one of the critical Christian theology. It's one of the three elements actually that Ana Maria talked about, which is la comunidad. I'm not going to talk about today about the three. Maybe in the future, if you read more about my work, la lucha or the struggle as the second element. And the third is kind of like a metaphor that sometimes for those of you who have heard about the work of Mujerista is allow me to speak or permítanme hablar. I'm focusing only in the impact, but that doesn't mean that the three are related to one another. So remember who we are and where we come from. Who is your comunidad? What are the lived realities and concreteness of your community? What are the concreteness, lived experiences, and social contexts that shape the community in which you are? What is the communal dimension of lo cotidiano that shapes your community? That's not a monolith. I am currently an assistant professor, as Carolina said, at Dominican University, which is in River Forest, which is a Sinsinagua Dominican Catholic Hispanic serving institution of higher education. I teach a first generation college age Latina or ex student population. And most of my students are likely the first in their familias to obtain a college degree. In addition, the majority commute from the Chicago barrios, neighborhoods, and suburbs, and most of their parents or immediate family members immigrated from Latin America. I have my students are most likely the first generation obtaining a 4-year college degree in the United States. And this is a great deal for them and their familias. Moreover, for the majority of my students, their families and communities represent a fundamental piece of their trajectory before, during, and after college. Any familias presentes today? Bienvenidos. Bienvenidos. Familias are critical in our comunidades. So when the first in their family graduates, success is not understood as an individual, but a communal experience that took not only acompañamiento, but financial, communal, emotional, and spiritual efforts, including lots of pressure. And first gen week is coming up. And this is a great deal. Sure, of navigating between these two worlds, the worlds of my familia, in different borderlands, the world of my familia in Colombia and my brother, and the world of the United States in which I live as a young adult, as a spouse, I raise a child. Success is not lived out in isolation, it's lived out in community, the communal dimension of lo cotidiano. There is nothing more than the communal dimension of lo cotidiano, that critical category, than that example. Titled Abuelita Theology, as part of the contemporary U.S. Latinx theological discourse and as a theological framework to reflect theologically on grassroots participatory action and communal wisdom, and a continuation of my very own scholarship on participatory action research. The figure of abuela or madres luchadoras, resilient mothers, have become a common theme. For example, in teaching the faith and role models of hope, resilience, service, community organizing, and solidarity, as I mentioned. However, this does not have to be the case for all my students in the classroom. In my Abuelita Theology course, abuela represents grassroots wisdom, participation, and action, and it departs from our lived realities and social context as a source of theologizing or God. All of my students highlight through their reflections the critical role of their comunidades, parents, siblings, aunties, tías, friends, amigas, abuelos, maestras, teachers, campus ministers, and so on, not only in their educational trajectory, but also in the process and tension, the living in between that I just mentioned, shaping self identity in light of the nosotros, in light of the we. Latina theologian Dr. Michelle Gonzalez explores on this dynamic, and she notes open who we are cannot be reduced to an isolated I, but instead must be understood as an I that is organically linked to a collective we. End quote. To intentionally reflect on a collective we. I want to highlight that this communal dimension of lo cotidiano raises critical questions of survival. This work inquires about the preferential option and attentiveness for our community's more humane living, thriving, and liberation. It is not an then, but a normative. And Dr. Maria Teresa Davila discusses on a preferential option for culture and the realities of lo cotidiano within a culture of privilege. And she writes, open quote, key to Latino theology is an anthropology of being for others from the perspective of the marginalized, close quotation. I remember of this as I teach with, for, and on behalf of, as I do a scholarship and write with, for, and on behalf of, and as I serve my community and the academy with, for, and on behalf of. And this is a communal and embodied incarnational act that speaks to and with an embodied gospel and God's embodied people. And to conclude, I would like to explore memory as critical in the communal dimension of lo cotidiano. And what an appropriate moment to remember who we are and where we come from. And the people of God said, this week, my students and I are reflecting on remembering those who came before us, our ancestors, particularly those who have departed from this life, our loved ones, our familias. The power of naming our communities, as Isasidias would say. She talks about that the power of naming ourselves is the most powerful act any person can do because it's actually a contextual act. In who we are and where we come from is much a spiritual act as a way to responding in hope and faith to our lived realities, to our humanity. The power of naming and remembering our communities, our comunidades, it's also an act of resistance to systemic categories that dehumanize relationships of love, nurturing, compassion, and care for one another. As Monica reminds us today in her theologizing Abuelita Mente, open quote, specifically in the intimacy of the presence of those closest to us. Remember, recuerden. And the people of God said, listen, thank you. And I would like so collage coming in. It's a live collage, and then collage. If you have a cell phone, so empty that phone, and then you just put the or two words or three words that you want to take that you're taking with you today, and then that will show up, and I will send it to Karen, and then she can print it and. As you do it, you can see how the collage is moving and all the words. I'm not sure, I don't know how to show it here, but you can see it. Or maybe this is some time for maybe conversation or questions. And just to open for questions and conversation.
First of all, thank you very much. I was taken by the fact that you were saying that your first theologian was Abuelitas, and which just enforces the fact that despite what we think, we really are a matriarchal society and not a patriarchal society. How does that translate when you're speaking to people who are not from that particular upbringing? In other words, in this diverse culture, when we talk about our abuelitas, others don't always have the same response. Similar, but at the same time, it is different.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your question. I'm going to begin with an example of what happens to me. This could not be like the stuff that I teach at Dominican could not be more specialized and raise questions such, can I take your class? Should I take your class? Am I able to take your class? So, I'm going to give an example. I teach a course, as I said, Abuelita Theology, right? And I also teach, U.S. Latina theology and spirituality. And believe it or not, I have had questions like, oh, I don't have an abuela, Dr. Herrera. Can I take that class? Actually, is that okay if I take that class? And because we live in as you mentioned, in a compartmentalized culture that Abuelita theology is for those who have abuelitas. Latina theology is for those who are Latinas. Hispanic ministry in theology is for those who are Hispanic or in Hispanic ministry. Even Hispanic serving institutions only serve to Latinx students. Because of the culture of compartmentalization, we place in compartments or departments themes or thematics, when in reality, what we propose is a framework of reflection and a framework of theology. The work of U.S. Latinx theology or the work of Abuelita theology is the work of theology. It is theology per se. And that's what it should be part of the teaching of our theologies, right? And sometimes we discuss on that. It's a challenge though, right? But it's a framework of theology. Early work of U.S. Latinx theologies utilize the framework of Lo Cotidiano to speak to a larger audience, to a larger church, and to a larger academy. Still challenges because it's reality, and because how do we bring together traditional theology with a theology that has been born in the grassroots and lived realities of the people that still challenges traditional theologies, right? So I'm not sure if I am, but this is a very good question, and I get that question a lot. But yeah. Yes, gracias.
Doctor, I want to get a clarification. You've talked about theology. And when I think about theology, I think about our unity in Jesus Christ. I think about our unity in the Eucharist, in baptism, in the reconciliation of our sins to a priest. And you've talked about Abuelita theology, but theology without a priest, theology without the centrality of Christ and the Eucharist is not theology at all, at least not Christian theology. And so what I need to understand is I had a grandmother who escaped from Russia because of the pogroms at the turn of the century. And what she demanded was, she was Jewish, but what she demanded was adherence to the faith, adherence to following the laws, the commandments. And her idea of family was centered around God. And you seem to be centering theology around abuelitas and around women. And I don't think that's a division that God would recognize. Any thoughts on this?
Well, Christian theology, thank you for your comment, but Christian theology is an incarnational theology of the 21st century. It's an incarnational theology. If we truly believe in the Trinitarian tradition that God is incarnate, we begin with our incarnational experience of what does it mean to be human, the incarnate God and Christ, which is Jesus Christ, right? So, yeah.
Women, and how can we get together as a community? But we have to believe in God, we have to believe in Jesus Christ and Our Lady, and go to church. And as Wayne said, the priest is the leader above all.
Thank you. Oh.
Muchas gracias, profesora, por su reflexión. Thanks so much for your reflection. As a director of university ministry at Dominican University, your courses have transformed the lives of our students in the ways in which they engage with theology, in the ways they engage thinking about God, spirituality, their families. And I was very moved by what you said in terms of participando en lo divino. And I think that's something that really motivates our students, that we partake in this mystery of co-creating with God. So I think, can you tell us more about why theology, why you teach theology, and what do you hope to co-create in your courses with students?
Beautiful question. As I said in my talk, I was not born a theologian. I became a theologian actually when I was studying as a college student international relations and political science in the global South. My faith was so important to me as a Catholic. I was born and raised Catholic. I wish they would have stayed here so they could have seen my Catholicism. But yeah, but I was born and raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school with the Salesian sisters who were such a joy to me, fascinating sisters, taught me so much. At the same time, while I was being raised by my grandmothers and my abuelas, and so when I was going to school, I was not able as a college student to kind of put these two together, as an undergraduate student in theology, and in international relations and political science, but I was living out my vocation as an undergraduate student in international relations and political science through my faith, and was motivated by my faith. And actually, why theology? Even before I became a theologian, my ministry work and the work for 10 years in la pastoral universitaria, or in campus ministry with the people, moved me to ask critical and important questions about my students' life, again, lo cotidiano, my students' life, particularly college-age Latinx students, which were the population that I served at the time, about their lives and their relationships with their faith, with God, and how those lived experiences as students infuse relationship with God or influence their relationship with God. I understood that their lives as college students was not separated from their own faith as people of God and their own understanding of God. Sometimes we separate the life and the lived realities of the people from the faith of the people. But what I really understood is that the lives of my students infuse and motivated the way how they relate with God and the divine. Actually, And I have to say it, and I don't mind to say it as a theologian, my lived experience as an immigrant Latina in the United States infused and shaped my faith as a Catholic woman in the United States, and solidarity with those who are different from me, just because of the fact that I felt different from others. And why theology? Because I want to invite my students to reflect and enter into a deeper reflection of God in the classroom, but ultimately that relationship and that reflection contributes to make of this world a better place for all, a more humane and just place for all. That's the incarnational dynamic of faith, the practical component of the faith. Like, how is this the reflection in the classroom and all that I am studying is moving me to act in justice and in faith in the society and in the world in which I live and make it a better place for all.
So, Claudia, I noticed that in that image that you showed, if you could go back to it, there's an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus over to the right there. And Pope Francis has just released an encyclical on the Sacred Heart of Jesus.
Yes.
And I confess I haven't read it yet because it's only been out for a
Same.
few days. I don't know if you have. But I was wondering, but I've read some kind of summaries of it and so on. But I was wondering if you had anything to say either about like what Pope Francis has to say about it, or what your abuela would have said about the Sacred Heart of Jesus. What's important about the Sacred Heart of Jesus to your abuela?
Well, the first image in la casa de mi abuelita, when you enter and go through the stairs, was the Sacred Heart of Jesus, El Sagrado Corazón de Jesús. And I grew up seeing that image. That was the image of Jesus to me. Actually, that was the first image that I got access to. Because before we are taken to church, we are born in a home, right? And the first image that I got access to was actually la imagen del Sagrado Corazón de Jesús. And it's there, it's present, it's how you grow up. Jesus is a caring heart, it's a compassionate heart, it's a heart for all the people. Actually, being in a Dominican community that talks about caritas veritas, corazón y verdad, love and truth, two values of the Dominican charism, I have learned to appreciate more the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Cor or corazón comes from verdad, from amor, core, from care, caritas, compassion. And Pope Francis talks about that. Compassionate world. How are we walking in care and compassion with one another and comunidad? I have to be honest, I have to read it. I haven't read it yet. Anybody else? Maybe somebody, young people here, college students? College students? Anybody comments or insights?
Hi, thanks for your talk.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more of a comment, I think, just thinking about what you've mentioned today. But, with the Abuelita theology, what gets passed down within the community, something that's interesting too, I think, that gets passed down is the trauma. And so,
Yes.
I mean, that's is evident. And
Yeah.
with Catholicism too, the
Mhm.
patriarchy, all of that. So what do you think, how do you think that gets filtered through women through communities, how is it that all of that, all the negative stuff is able to come out as good as
Yes.
that
Yes.
theology?
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing it. In my own work as a practical theologian, I see a lot of generational trauma that is somehow tied to religious trauma, right? And how do we heal as we walk together in the journey and reconcile? So that I've seen, I was talking about the in-betweenness. I didn't cover today the part of La Lucha, which is a critical category of U.S. Latina theology, or the struggle. And I am beginning to rethink on the struggle in a way that it speaks of that in-betweenness, of that reality, the beauty and the messiness of it all, of our own. What does it mean to grow up in a family where there is reality? And when I have to face the messiness of reality, right? And I had to face it as growing up. And I see that a lot coming out in my own work. There's actually current research that is happening in terms of how do we heal trauma, generational trauma in our family, so we don't romanticize, what is to be a comunidad, what is to be a familia. We don't idolize, again, the familia, the abuela, the comunidad, but ultimately we heal and reconcile. And I see a lot in the stories that my students share in the classroom, that there is healing in the process somehow. And if not, there is still the recognitions of that tension of the trauma, but of the love and the we and I, right? Yeah, so success is communal and not lived out in isolation. However, so it's it's complicated. And I'm glad you're bringing it. This is not like the sociological part of my research, but the social sciences of my research, which is real. Mhm.
Thank you very much. As an alumni of DePaul, I was invited to this event, and all I could say is thank you for your work. I believe in God's timing, and continue, apoyando las mujeres latinas or Latinx community and everyone else. Today, I was at a Latinx event at a Niles West High School. That's where I work, and it's growing. It's the numbers doubled since last year, and all I could say is thank you. I enjoyed your talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your affirmation.
Oh, my name is Carlos, and thank you so much for your presentation. And I would try to see if I can sort my thoughts in this question, but I am just curious to know how is En Lo Cotidiano has changed, especially now with the whole generational gap, and how is the abuelita, la presencia de la abuelita, now than before? Because as I see this image, I can relate and think of home right now, but I'm wondering now with everything changing, what is lo cotidiano?
Yes. And definitely, maybe I always think about what's going to happen in 10 years, 20 years. Like my students do this type of research. And we talk about what does it mean to be first generation? What does it mean to be second? And the other day we were talking in class about the majority of my students are the first generation in their family to obtain a college degree, for example, or even the first generation in the United States, right? But what's going to happen if they have generation? So we talk about what will happen with your generations. They're no longer going to be able to say, my mom or my dad, I'm the first generation. Actually, my mom and my dad have a college degree or went to school, went to college. So definitely it's changing. In my own research, there's still the madres, these resilient mothers are critical in lo cotidiano of the life of my students. And their efforts and their familias is still present. Why? because they're still first our 1.5 generation. And maybe the third, fourth, fifth generation is different, but the community and the group that I participate with, the mothers and the resilient families are still present when they talk about la lucha, when they talk about lo cotidiano, when they talk about their faith, when they talk about everyday practice, still they come up. Yeah, particularly in Latinx, college age Latinx. And then the research of Hosman Ospino, I always point to the greater national research. You know, the way our research doesn't compartmentalize. It still shows that about la realidad de la familia hispana. You know, the reality of the Latinx family still in 2024. Two-thirds of our Latinx community in poverty. And what is the educational trajectory of that? That affects greatly our comunidad. That affects greatly lo cotidiano of a people. So we're going to get there, but we're still working. And that's why programs like PASO, that's why programs like other programs that are opening up, which is the Esperanza right now, for our students to grow in faith and when they're still that lucha, that lo cotidiano. I wonder how this is going to shape in the next 2 decades or so. Definitely will shape. It will completely shape the research.